So thank you for tuning in to Growing Tech Fast, the condensed podcast in which conversations about growing SaaS startups are had with those who have grown them. Now today, a great pleasure of being joined by Mike Azzolino, who is currently the Director of Sales at Wistia. Mike, fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Connor. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, the place we always start, Mike, is by getting our guests to just give us a brief overview, firstly, of their career. So for the benefit of our listeners, if you want to give us a quick overview, Mike, of where your career has taken you, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I started my sales journey actually with the Bose Corporation in college many years ago, longer ago than I'd like to admit, but really world-class training program, and kind of helped me realize that what I wanted to do was, help people for a living. And this was a great opportunity to combine that with the social aspect of what I enjoyed doing growing up, which was meeting and talking to people. So started there, and then quickly after that shifted actually into the finance industry, and started working for retail banking for over 5 years. So kind of worked my way up through the retail banking world, and was running a region in New Hampshire and Vermont. And after a while of doing that, I just realized it was a different career path than I really wanted to be on. Suit and tie every day, working in a retail bank, learned a lot, right? And I did that during the financial crisis, right? Which is also like a really intense time to be in finance and in banking. And what I knew I wanted to do was sell software, right? Like my entire family had done that. I had just kind of grown up in that environment, but I didn't want to throw away the 5 years that I had invested in a career. And so I worked really hard to find an opportunity that would allow me to actually sell software to banks. So the bank that I was working for actually became one of my first customers, and really just worked my way up, starting, selling to regional and local banks, and then working up to tier one banks like your JP Morgans, Barclays, etc. And then, over time, just made the switch back into leadership, and have since, over the last decade or so, been running SaaS sales organizations at a few different companies. So.
Fantastic. Cool. So that's interesting. Being in finance in the financial crisis, that must have taught you a fair bit, I imagine.
It sure did. I think folks in that industry deserve a bit more credit, I think, sometimes than they get. Right? They're made out to be bullies sometimes, and made out to just be in it for a buck. And there was a lot of hard stories. I think we're experiencing a lot of those now in the world, right? Where we were waking up every day to try to solve the problem and help people afford their bills and do things as best they could. And it was really challenging, but it was rewarding in a lot of ways too. So.
Cool. I'm sure. And what I really want to, delve into, Mike, is what you just talked about, what you've been doing for the last 10 years, which is growing very successfully sales organization within SaaS startups. But before I do, I just want, for the purpose of our listeners, want to give a shout out, obviously, to Wistia, which is your current gig where you're the Director of Sales. If you just want to give us a quick overview of what it is that Wistia do, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So Wistia is an end-to-end content management solution that's really designed to help anyone take control of their content, right? Capture and send data to all of their tools and teams and bring all their content to one place. So really the goal is to be able to attract the right audience, right? Create binge-worthy content, and get the most out of that content, right? Especially in a world where everyone's gone remote, right? Like the need to be able to create compelling content and use that content to drive anything from sales velocity and leads to your team to really just get out there and get known, is a mission that we're on, and one that we're really passionate about, and really have been delivering on for the last 15 years, which is exciting. So.
Cool. Lots of great stuff I know going over at Wistia as well. I wanted to make sure we gave it a shout out. But I said what I really want to focus on today, Mike, and where you're, from a higher level, where your expertise lies, which is in scaling, successfully scaling and growing sales orgs within fast growth startups. A lot of the people listening will be part of a fast growth startup. They'll either be growing fast or they'll be wanting to grow fast. So I really want to draw on your experience there. So I guess to start with a nice broad question, I'm sure we'll get more specific, but to your mind and in your experience, what is the most important thing when you're setting out to scale a sales team from, the foundations, from the ground up, if you like? Where do you need to begin?
Yeah, I think the first place to really start is around standardization and structure, right? I've had the pleasure in multiple journeys, especially in the startup world, to really enter at a time where it's a bit of the Wild West, right? Like there's, you've got inbound lead traffic coming in, you've got some outbound happening, but I think specialization is probably where to focus first, right? Is to figure out where you're winning, where you're losing, and then work to impact that, right? And so in all of the journeys I've been on, the place that we focused first is to try to let the data help us drive decisions. So what's the data telling us, right? Like start to look at where are we winning, where do conversion rates increase, where does sales cycles start to slow down, where do we start to see different competition enter the market? So even before that, right, I think the first step is to make sure that you can track that data. And so really leveraging your CRM and leveraging the sales reps as your first line of defense. They are in the trenches every day, talking to customers and experiencing where are those gaps in your product and where competition, has a shortcoming or where they're winning. And so leveraging that insight and finding a way to capture that data is really the first step. And then once you can start to do that, you can make, longer term play calls that help you scale and structure the team effectively. So.
Oh, I love it. The word I heard so frequently was data, data, data. I think that's so important, isn't it? The data doesn't lie. It's so
Right.
important
Yeah.
to be
Well
making
said.
those informed decisions. There's obviously so many amazing tools out there, and just more and more by the year that seem to be that are there to assist and help with that very thing. So that's really cool. So that's step one. Actually, I wasn't going to do this, but given we ended on that little cliffhanger and teaser there, what's step two? So what do you do next?
Yeah, step two is really execution, right? And so, an example of a way that we've done that in some of the journeys I've been on, right, was to start to look at where we saw slow down, right? Where did we see the sales cycle increase, or where did we see win rates decrease, as an example, right? And as we started to do that, what you really look at is what's happening is typically the sales cycle is becoming more complicated. There's more decision makers involved, or there's different buyer expectations. So what's worked really well in the journeys I've been on is to take time to make sure that we're aligning rep skill set to buyer behavior, right? And so the way that we get to figure out what that buyer behavior is by looking at the data, see what the data tells you, and where you start to see, like you said, the data doesn't lie. Where do you see material differences? And then by specializing and segmenting a sales org and a team, you start to create a skill set that allows you to increase those win rates, right? And speed up velocity in your sales cycles. And so that's really step two, is operationalizing it, right? So let the data kind of guide you with where it goes. And then the next step is to typically find a way to structure the team where there's differentiation. And the benefit of also creating that segmentation is typically you can create a really compelling career path for your team, right? And for the sales reps, so that they can start in a more potentially transactional, faster moving sales cycle, have a lot of at bats, get their feet wet, and then continually develop the skill set that allows them to then take the next step in their career at your organization, right? There are a lot of sales orgs that are structured where, in order for an account executive or an SDR to take the next step in their journey, they have to leave. And my mission is to create a career path that allows them to progress and really develop the skill sets that they're going to need to work larger, more lucrative deals, and ideally increase their wealth at the same time, and they're have fun and get more out of the journey at the company they're at. So
Cool. I really like that. I think that emphasis on internal progression is so important. I'm sure we'll come back to that towards the end. I really want to talk
sure.
about keeping your people happy, and I think clear career path and trajectory is really important within that. But just sticking to talking about growing things from the ground up. So we've talked about a couple of important steps. I want to hone in on something a bit more specific now, which is just around the sales process, I guess. So where is it you begin when defining a sales process? This is really primitive, right? You've grown a sales organization. Obviously, this is going to mature over time, but when you're starting to define a sales process, what's most important? What do you need to be thinking about and considering?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it. I think the first place to start is just what do you want your methodology to be, right? And that ties back to really, what's the data telling you? What are your buyers telling you? What are your losses telling you? I think we learn more from every loss we get than any win. And so we're focused, on studying those and trying to figure out, was it sales process? Was it market? Was it product? What was it that made it so we couldn't earn that deal? And I think, as many sales leaders do, you typically look inward and you sit there and say, it's got to be sales process, right? Like it's got to be, let's start there. So I think first is figuring out, like, what are you holding your team and your prospects accountable to, right? So when you look at that, it's is it MEDDIC, right? Like, are you trying to find, metrics, economic buyer, decision maker, decision criteria, all that stuff. And what fits your process, right? Are you in a more transactional model where qualification, maybe it's a lower ADV, a more emotional purchase, and so it really comes down to how you hold your prospects accountable, setting next steps, things like that, or is it a longer sales cycle, a more enterprise type of model where you need to really take time to dive into discovery and qualification. All of that stuff's important regardless of the size you're selling, what you're selling. But I think so. Step one is to look at the methodology that you want to adopt as a team. I think step two is to really create processes that allow your teams to kind of stay in their swim lanes, right? Like, we want to standardize and focus on standardizing our discovery process, right? Like, what are the questions you want to ask? How do you ask them so that they're organic, right? And that all ties back to the way that you want to run your demo, right? I think the process that I've taken on a couple different organizations is to first actually think through, like, what is the linear flow of our product and our demo, and like, what pains does it solve for? We're training our teams to really do discovery on what we call pain and paid, right? So, like, what are the challenges to the way you run your business today, prospect? And how do you quantify, your worth, or how do you quantify, how do you make money? And how does your department, show up on the balance sheet, and see if we can tie that back to the way that our product can deliver and really solve their problems and help. I think a lot of salespeople, a lot of organizations get into the cycle of feature function selling, and like, you have to an extent. You can't. You need to be able to demonstrate what you do, but if you tie that back more, I think, to pain and the pains that you solve for, you can earn partnerships that you otherwise wouldn't have. And like, that's a really big key to scaling and growing, as you deliver on enablement for your team and constantly drive that message home.
Cool. I love it. There's a few things there you said that I think really resonate. I think, as a general principle, actually, especially within startups, but in life, learning more from your losses than you ever do from your wins. It's really important. You said to be analyzing those and taking and squeezing every lesson, I guess, possible out of that. I took from that as well, clear selling methodology, and I guess picking the right one for you. I think that was something I heard you say, was not necessarily there is our right methodology per se. It's all about what's going to be best for your particular situation, product, sales cycle, etc. So something I just want to draw out, two more specific questions actually, just around the kind of growth side of things. It's because we discussed this previously, Mike. I thought it was really interesting. So firstly, you talked about, and you referenced this at the start, where you said you're coming in, you've got a mix of a kind of inbound, a bit of outbound going on. It's all a bit of a, I guess, a warmed up, probably unstructured operation at the beginning. And something that you said that I thought was really interesting was that there's a real need to figure out the funnel. You talked about that being a really kind of key step, if you like. So could you just unpack that for us in a bit more detail?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, you nailed it with the verbiage, which is just really figuring out the funnel, right? The first step is to look at, where is your opportunity coming from, right? And so, the key metrics, I think the way that I try to lead and focus on is, I've worked in orgs where the focus is on activity, right? And the focus is on how many calls, how many emails, all that stuff, right? You see thousands of LinkedIn posts about how not to do that, but it still ends up happening, right? I look at activity as a data point to help you coach and enable your team, but that activity volume is going to differ. You're going to have reps on your team that get a meeting after 10 calls, and you're going to have a rep on your team that needs to do 23, right? So like, their math equation is going to be different, and I think really strong leaders figure out not only the motivators for the team, but also what their math equation is, right? So going back to just like, how to really dig into the funnel is to really figure out like, what is that math equation, right? Like what's happening today? What is our our MQL to opportunity creation percentage right now, right? And that helps drive to figure out some stuff we were talking about earlier, which is like, how should I structure the team? How should I segment? Is there enough to add heads and to make sure that those heads can get fed and have a path to get to their number at the same time, right? That's really important. I think it depends on your model and what you're trying to accomplish, but more and more you're seeing now that it's shifting to a place where sales executives and the business are solving for each other. I think, when I started out in the sales world, you solved for the business, right? Like you had a list, a number, and your goal is to go get it, right? And I think there has to be a good balance there. And so again, MQL to SQL is one metric and like one output that we measure and hold ourselves accountable to. SQL being something that makes it into pipeline, makes it into your forecastable pipeline. Another metric to then look at is obviously your SQL to win and your MQL to win rates, right? So those are really the three kind of legs to the stool that we're focused on. But then in addition to that, you're looking at, what's your sales cycle? How long does it take? Where are the leads coming from that you're winning the most? And how do you go get more of them, right? So it creates the partnership between sales and marketing, and you hear it all the time, is the most important partnership I think there is at any organization, and it needs to be bi-directional, and it needs to be a really tight-knit group. And we focus here a lot of time and effort on making that relationship as strong as it can be. And because like you're gonna feed each other, right? Like we're getting great volume from our marketing team and we're turning that into MRR and into wins. We then need to be able to go back and give feedback and share what's working and what's not, right? And in turn, marketing needs to come to us and be like, hey, your team's not hanging out on this campaign as much as we wanted them to. How do we drive that, right? So a lot of it comes back to holding each other accountable. So I don't know if that helps answer the question around funnel metrics, but that's really the way to break it down for us. It's like, where's your revenue coming from, and bringing that all the way back to the top of the funnel to figure out like what campaigns are working. And then the other lever, obviously within that was really the inbound funnel. The other one is, what are you doing from an outbound perspective? How are you finding opportunities that marketing isn't? And I think once you start to crack that code, that's where you can scale and grow incrementally really, really quickly. So yeah.
Cool. Nice. I like it. Figuring out the math equations you put it. It's almost like the science of growth, right? It goes back to again using the data. So I liked that, and I loved what you said. Obviously, sales and marketing, arguably the most important relationship, and what you said there, it's a reciprocal relationship, right? It's both rising to the top at the same time through that kind of continual feedback loop. So that was really useful. And the second part of the kind of, I guess, second step, if you like, that we talked about after figuring out the funnel was something I found really interesting, was around finding MRR that you otherwise wouldn't have. I think that's how you phrased it to me. So I thought I'd love if you could again just share a bit more on that topic, Mike.
Yeah. So as an example, in a few different orgs that I've been a part of, as you're starting out, a lot of times you leverage an SDR team almost as a qualification engine, right? Like we need velocity, right? So let's figure out what's going on. Let's get people reaching out to, our funnel to figure it out. Really great way to scale early and quickly. But I think over time, what you end up doing is you end up kind of creating an environment where two people are doing the job of one person. Right. And so one of the key things that we focused on here was shifting that focus, right? Or better said, shifting what each of our teams were doing. So when we have leads that come in that are warmer and score up high enough to reach our MQL score, we pass those directly to closers. We pass those directly to account executives that can work them and move them, straight through the funnel to a closed won opportunity. What we did in turn is we took the SDR organization. We said, hey, we want to create new business opportunity and outbound opportunity from this team. And if they're doing that 8 hours a day, all week long, we're going to find opportunities that we otherwise wouldn't have. So the idea was, let's capitalize on the inbound funnel that we're getting from marketing already, pass that directly to people that can close them. Because the other thing that was happening, Connor, is we were creating and this isn't just us, like this, I've seen this at a lot of different places, but companies tend to create a barrier to entry, right? Like you have a customer or a prospect that's really ready to potentially purchase your solution, right? Like the world we live in now, it's very easy to do your homework, go on to G2 Crowd, go on to different review sites, learn what you need to learn, watch videos, and purchase. We were creating a step where they would need to talk to one person, go through a qualification step, and then set up another chat later today, tomorrow, whatever. And we were delaying that process by getting those warmer leads directly to people that can serve them, close them, and really help them. It opened up really another funnel for us. So what our SDR team is focused on is working solely on outbound prospecting, right? So in other words, finding ops that we aren't inspiring through marketing and getting those over to AEs as well to close win. And what that's created for us is incremental revenue that we just otherwise wouldn't have gotten, right? Every single meeting, every single win, every single learning opportunity that's coming from an SDR team just wouldn't have happened in the past. And by doing that, it's allowing us to scale and grow the business really quickly, which is exciting. So that's really, the biggest part of it. And then I think the other part is, as you segment your AE team and your sales team, is ensuring that you can create a lever where outbound is part of the role, right? In some cases where outbound is the role, right? And I think the more you can do that, you can also create an environment where reps are in control of their destiny more, right? I think it's hard when you're 100% reliant on inbound leads, right? Like there's stuff out of your control to get to your number. I want to create an environment where you're in control as much as you can be to your number. That doesn't mean I don't want you to get inbound leads and like be able to work really fast movers and get to your number quickly. But I think if there's a combination there where you're also investing, the other part that happens in that journey is like you're investing in your career path, right? As you grow as an account executive, as a sailor, throughout your journey, there's going to come a time where you're working bigger, larger deals, and you're expected to hunt more and find your own opportunities. So by creating a career path that allows you to do that over time as you progress, you get to a place where I think you've got folks that are a lot more excited to wake up and be part of the team, are getting more out of the journey every step of the way, and are helping you grow the business at the same time, which is really the ideal like trifecta, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to have one without the other, so all three are really important.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like a win for all parties essentially. And you said in control. The salespeople, we love being in control as well. So the more we can be in control, and the more we can affect our own destiny, earnings, etc., the better. So yeah, I really like that you said that also fuels the business growth and ultimately leads to that shared goal as well. So cool. Well, look, we've done loads of stuff specifically there on growth. We really digged into that. I guess like from a slightly different angle, a question from my side. Sometimes I hear or gets thrown around that growing too fast actually can be a detriment. It can be damaging. You need to be careful at the rate in which you grow. Now your guys been a part of some very fast growing organizations. So I wanted to get your take specifically on what you make of that statement. Is that fair?
I think it's very fair. Yeah, it's easy to get out over your skis, and I think when you do that, it's also easy to get misaligned cross-functionally within your own your own team, right? Like the marketing and sales relationship starts to struggle if those goals aren't aligned, and it's easy to get those goals really misaligned if you're trying to grow too quickly. So I think the key to that, to make sure that you're growing at the clip that you need to be, and pushing yourselves, is to really plan ahead as far out as you can, right? And it's funny, I reread a book this weekend called Essentialism, and really the thought of that book is how to say yes to the right things and how to be really, really confident in saying no to the things that don't help you achieve your goal, right? And the first step of that is to really lay out what it is you're trying to accomplish. And when you do that, then asking yourself and holding you and your leadership team and your family and any scenario in life accountable to the end result, right? And if that end result, for example, is, hey, we're trying to grow I don't know, make it up. You're trying to grow revenue 50% month over month or year over year. As you're getting thrown a ton of different scenarios and decisions, right? There's a lot of encouragement to say yes to everything. Let's just do it all, right? And what ends up happening is you do 5 things, 20%, right? Instead of doing one thing at 100%. And so a big part of what we're pushing ourselves to do and what I push myself to do is to say yes to the right things. And the way to get there is you need to align on what the end goal is together and be like very crystal clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish. And then when scenarios come your way, you can sit down and say to yourself, like, does this actually get us closer to that goal? And if the answer is no, you can't be half in, or you can't be, you can't be wishy-washy on what you want to do. What you have to really hold yourself accountable to is if the answer is it doesn't, or better said, if the answer is I'm not sure if it gets us to our goal or it only gets us partway there, you should be okay saying we're not doing that, we're doing this, right? And so easier said than done, right? That's a practice that I think, in 30 plus years of trying to accomplish, right? Like, you're never all the way there. It's an ongoing exercise, but I think it's a really good way to look at it, to hold yourself accountable to growing at the clip that's going to make the most sense for you. And yeah, so that's how I see it. So yeah, short answer, I think you can grow too fast for sure.
Or
try to
absolute,
anyway.
absolute clarity, essentially, what it is that you want, and having the ability to say yes or to say no. And essentialism then is obviously a book people should be checking out by the sound of it. So it's a good read. I've not come across it, so a little recommendation. Read. Cool.
Yeah,
nice. Well, as we come towards the end of the time, something I want to focus on very briefly, we haven't touched on necessarily, is something that's at the heart, I guess, of all this growth. Mike, I think we're aligned this. We spoke about this, is the importance of the people that you hire. Finding and attracting the best talent, retaining that, and getting the most out of that journey along the way for those people involved, right? So I wanted to briefly finish on, how have you as a leader successfully, which you must have done given the achievements you've had, how have you successfully got the most out of people? So thinking here of any newish sales leaders, business leaders who are trying to motivate and learn the best principles of getting the best out of their people and making it again an environment in which they can enjoy the journey on the way as well. Any top tips that you can leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think coaching and enablement is hands down the most important part of any leadership role, right? Like, you have to prioritize that. And I think if you do that, you're going to create a group of folks that are really inspired to get up and go every day, because they're getting better, right? I used to work for a CEO many, many years ago, and he would start every meeting and he would say, the day you stop learning here is the day you should stop working here. And it wasn't a threat, right? It was really a philosophy on, if you're in a role that's not challenging you and that you're not investing in every day and trying to get better at and learning from it, it's time to move on. You're not going to get much out of the journey, right? So I think creating an environment where everybody, the leadership team, the account executives, the sailors, everybody on the team is challenged, but is also getting the support to know how to do it, right? I think you hear the word, servant leadership thrown out there or whatever, but I think it's more about being able to lead by example and sit down and be able to show them. Like, one of the things we do here is we do like call parties, right? Where myself and other sales managers sit down and we make calls with the team, and we learn from that and we collaborate together on it. And there's plenty that I've had that, I could have done a better job, right? And so I think being vulnerable and being human is really the most important part. I think we lose that some of the time when we're trying to scale and grow a business, and you can't. In fact, I think, like, you shouldn't grow at the expense of being human, right? And driving a culture that's gonna help people thrive. And if you feel yourself doing that, you got to fix it, right? Because, like, it's not, folks don't respond to that, right? Like, they want to be part of something bigger. And then that ties back to just career path. I think the number one way to motivate and excite a team is to show them a clear path on how they can take the next step in their career, in the job and the company that they're in right now. And that comes back to making sure that there's really clear KPIs, really clear rules of engagement. And you know, the way that we've achieved that in multiple orgs that I've been a part of is ensuring that like part of the career path is a math equation, right? If you do X, like you're going to achieve a senior promotion, right? But in addition, once that happens, how do we get you ready for the next step in your career, right? Because it can't just be a math equation. It can just be like, I'm the top rep, now I'm promoted, right? Obviously, that's not going to hurt. That's a good thing. But I think it needs to come down to like, are you developing the skill sets, and are we as a leadership team investing in you so that you can take the next step in your career? I tell a lot of our team many, many times, I hope you're here forever. I don't think that's realistic, right? Like my guess is you're going to work in other companies. It's my job to wake up every day to try to help you get the most out of your journey. And if that ends up taking you out of our company and allowing you to take the next step in your career somewhere else, like I actually succeeded. We did our job. You know, and so the goal is not to just say, hey, we want to get everybody promoted to another place. We want to create that career path here, but over time, that's still a very rewarding thing. And I think if as a leader, you're waking up with that as your North Star, is making sure that everybody on your team is getting something more out of the journey and preparing themselves for the next step in their career, you're going to get a lot more output from the team. You're also going to get a lot more out of the journey that you're on. I sold software for a long time, and I could have kept selling, right? But the part for me that was missing was being, impacting the lives. And maybe that's a little cliche and like too dramatic, but I like to think that I'm making an impact, right? And that like I'm helping somebody get better at their craft, and wake up excited about what they're doing. And I think if that's why you're in leadership, and that's what you're waking up to do every day, you're going to have a much more rewarding journey, and likely a much more lucrative one over time as well. So.
Fantastic. That's a great note to finish. I think I put in the human side into it. I loved the obviously focus on coaching as well. Call parties. I think that's something that everyone should be going into. And I think it really highlights, Mike, something that you mentioned, which is just the power of leading by example. I think example, as you said, goes a long way. And I think my favorite takeaway, and great note to finish on, is the day you stop learning is the day you should stop working. I think that's a really powerful message. So thank you so much for all that we've crammed into that short space of time. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your background, your wisdom, your insights as well. So thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this.
Yeah, no, other way around, Connor. Thank you. It was really awesome to be a part of this, and I'm honored to have the chance to talk to you, so thank you.
Cheers, Mike. Okay, well, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Growing Tech Fast. Cheers.